Hello, you're listening to the Working Class Avant-Garde. Just kidding. That's not where this is going. Hi, guys. Welcome back to the Valor 21 channel. My name is Valor 21, aka Caleb WH, aka Lawrence, aka Caleb. Whatever suits your fancy. I would like to come to you guys with a few updates about my channel and where this is going. First and foremost, if you guys are new here, welcome to the Valor 21 channel. I highly recommend checking out some of my other videos before coming back here because this won't make any sense. It's kind of, unless you just want to be here, that's fine too. That is great. We welcome everybody here. That's kind of my whole point, Christian and all that. So yeah, first and foremost, you're probably noticing a few differences in some of my older videos and some of my new videos. That's on purpose. As of 3 weeks ago, I was chrismated into, about a month at this point. A month ago, I was chrismated into the Orthodox Church. I have been explaining Orthodoxy. I've been talking about Orthodoxy since about July of 2024. That was around the time I had been in Orthodoxy, like inquiring for about a year. And my priest gave me the go-ahead to talk about it. And so that was like what I was doing. A few other things you may notice is a lot of my videos are getting longer and a lot of them are related to either published works or oratory. That's also on purpose. I originally started this channel with the explicit purpose in mind of unedited talking to a camera. There's a reason for that. When I started my YouTube channel, I was heavily inspired by, people who do video essays, theological lectures, unedited talks to cameras. I found those to be both authentic, real, so there was no divide between me and the person behind the camera. Believe me, I'm okay with a bit of, pitchfork people coming for my head. I know that there's not a lot of people that are, but I can handle a critique or two, believe me. And so yeah, so you're probably wondering, currently, why am I saying all of this? Well, as of being chrismated, I've wanted to expand this project into other things. I've wanted to, yes, by the way, the talking to a camera part is going to stay. The rambling logs are going to stay. They're just going to be different, and there's also going to be more stuff added. A few months ago, you probably would have noticed that I started writing poetry. The reason you probably know this is because of my YouTube channel. There is a playlist in my YouTube channel that I have made public that is basically religious poetry. And when I started writing it about a year ago, it was because I was recommended this by my high school counselor. By the way, Miss Middleton, if you're watching this, thank you so much. That was extremely therapeutic for the time, and I found a passion that I'm really in love with. Philosophy, theology, and of course, poetry. We will get to that book in a second. First of all, I would like to say that all of this stuff is going to stay. I just need to update y'all on a few changes you will see going forward. First and foremost, I have a Substack now. And a lot of that Substack is supposed to replace the rambling logs. I'm going to turn the rambling logs into something else. That's why I'm saying this. The rambling logs were specifically designed to get ideas to you in the most authentic and personable and human way possible. I wanted to kind of be like I was taking myself down on a pedestal and just talking to you as if we were going on a walk or something. That was on purpose. I was heavily inspired by an old guy on YouTube who recited the Iliad in perfect Greek, and this guy's like an Appalachian old guy, and I was like, this guy's marvelous. And he has a lot of fun rants and political takes and stuff that I find interesting too. And he's definitely one of my inspirations. My second inspiration was a guy named Wendigoon. Now, Wendigoon has light edits in his videos, and recently he's been getting more and more expansive. He was a huge inspiration for me starting this channel. He is a Appalachian Southern Baptist. I wouldn't even call him a Southern Baptist, but he's a Baptist. He comes from the Baptist tradition. But when I tell you this guy is the Baptist that I wish I knew in my Church of Christ tradition, he would talk about weird, esoteric concepts, and he wasn't afraid of talking about weird, esoteric concepts. He wasn't afraid of backlash or talking about things that may be considered controversial. I was like, that's what I want, but I want to do it in his charitable and loving style. Sorry, my foot just got numb. I'm sitting on a bed writing this, so my bad. Okay, so I was heavily inspired by these people to make this channel to where I'm talking to you. I've recently created a Substack, an article, writing articles just to do that, because I've noticed that my rhetorical style can be, diluted into a way that is still human, but also deeply personal, and it can be refined in a way. And I can tell stories, I can add pictures, I can do all of this without, having to learn how to edit. And that makes that really useful. Feel free to use like AI readers to read it, or if you have problems with, you know, reading stuff on your phone. There are websites that I will link in the description to help with that. Because by the way, there is a capability that Substack, sorry, numb foot. There is a capability that Substack has in particular, to take these articles and read them out loud. For you. So I wanted to make sure that all of my weird autistic kids like me could also enjoy esoteric ideas. I was not going to keep that from them, believe me. Okay, so those are the first thing. However, the Substack is going to largely replace the small form, 20-minute videos that you will be getting in that you would get here. And they're also going to be way better. Like, I'm talking significantly better points, significantly better oratory, significantly better string thoughts together. Is great. I highly recommend it. I have started this Substack as of 3 weeks ago, and currently I think there's over 40 articles there already. The old rambling logs will be staying up just in case somebody needs them. Absolutely, if you guys like those, feel free to watch them. I wouldn't want to keep that from you. So no, I'm not just going to be deleting them and like, we're going to evacuate ship. No, none of that. I made a promise to myself when I started making social media accounts that I was never going to delete a post. Yes, I said that specifically so that you could watch the development of my own ideas, so you didn't think that I was some, like, prophet in the sky who never made a mistake. I don't want you to think that. I can make mistakes, I can say dumb stuff, but I want that to be on record so you go, oh, he said that, but that's changed. And if I need to, I will go back and explain why I said that and apologize and try to make that better. I feel like I would be wrong as a person who both loves Christ and is trying to explain these ideas for the outcast in a very human way. I would feel wrong if I didn't do that. Third thing you're probably noticing. You're probably noticing that the camera quality is stranger, all of the videos are horizontal, and you're probably noticing the highly grainy footage that you're currently looking at. That's on purpose too. Not really. I didn't really want it to be in 1080p, in 440p like this, but quite frankly, I have a microphone and it's terrible. Like, I literally tried making this video 3 different times with with this microphone, and it's trying to be weird, and so that's why I'm like, all right, I'll throw it out. I'm not gonna throw it out, just in case I can get it back to working. But that's why the audio sounds like somebody crunched it up and threw it in a meat grinder. And the video looks this way, probably because it's also kind of in the dark. Let me fix that. Maybe this is a smidge better. I don't know. Maybe not. Actually, yeah, that is a lot better. Wow, that looks better. Hi, how's it going? Yeah. Hi, how's it going? Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm playing with that. So the rambling logs will be going away. Or sorry, not be going away. The rambling logs will be staying, but they will be refined into my Substack articles. I can tell you that the quality of those Substack articles puts to shame almost all of my rambling logs. There's a few that I'm like, yeah, that's really good too. That's on par. But most of my rambling logs were, again, supposed to be me talking to you as a human being. And that's what I made the Substack for, was to keep that, but also it be portable and, not having to take, 30 minutes out of your day just to get a few philosophical points. I can cram in a lot more substance into the Substack articles rhetorically. Autism, all of that kind of stuff. The third thing I'd like to mention is relating to some of the ways that this channel will be expanding. First and foremost, I will be restarting the Wretched Psalter series. The Wretched Psalter, by the way, is out on Amazon, and you can get it. Just look up the Wretched Psalter or Caleb WH, and a lot of my this poetry will be popping up. Um, I would like to start with just this in particular, and we'll make a second video related to an intro for the Wretched Psalter series. But first and foremost, what you're going to need to know is that this is this is my first ever piece of religious poetry. I actually did this one because I didn't really want to write a philosophy or a theology treatise right away. I tried to do that when I was 16, and I had to gut all of it because all of my perspectives changed. And a lot, and no, not all of them, but most of the substance and stuff I basically had to gut. Secondly, I was recommended to write this by a school counselor of mine about a year ago. And by the way, Miss Middleton and any of the White House staff in the counseling department, if you guys are watching this, thank you guys so much. I will not be saying which school district, so find me ho. No, I'm kidding. Find me ho. Anyway, I did not mean to say that. Excuse my French. But basically what you need to know is this was recommended. I was recommended to write this by my counselor. I will be going into just, I won't go into too much detail about her, but she was very, very charitable with me in high school, dealing with a lot of the stuff that I was dealing with. She talked to me in counseling. She was a very, very, she would listen to me, and she was my counselor, if I remember correctly, from sophomore all the way to the end of senior year. And if you're listening to this, Miss Middleton, thank you so much. You were a very, very positive impact in me. And also, Miss, what's her name? Miss Henderson, if you're listening to this. You too. You were also amazing. I can remember coming into school mad one day, or I'd get mad in class and be like, "I'm going to the counselor's office." Ain't nobody stopped me either, because they knew we catch smoke. And quite frankly, most of the principals, let me say that most of the principals were very cordial with me. Most of the authority figures at that school were also very cordial with me. And so I'd like to thank y'all for that. That made my high school experience, especially with all the stuff going on that you can read about in my Substack, a lot easier for me. Towards the end of my maybe the beginning of my senior year, beginning of my senior year, I had a kind of religious break. It was slightly before that in junior year, and my senior year, I was exploring this with her. And she, by the way, is not Orthodox, but honestly, truth is truth. Don't really care. They may not have the fullness, but this woman was very, very helpful. She was an Anglican, and I remember that specifically because I was looking into those traditions. She was very, 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 she, even, if I remember correctly, towards the end of the school year, she, like, walked outside and talked with me. I've only had a few people do that. So, wanted to thank y'all in particular, especially that counseling staff over there, from yours truly. She recommended that I write this after I was explaining to her all of the existential angst that I was having. And I was asking her questions that her as a counselor, she either could not answer, they were too hard for her, or legally she couldn't answer. And so this was her solution to that problem. She basically flat out, she's the first counselor to ever look at me and say, "I don't have an answer for you. I can tell you what to do therapeutically, though." And so she recommended, because I was interested in all of these esoteric concepts, to write a psalter in the style of the Psalm of David. That was the original thesis. And she said that, and I was like, all right, I see where this is going. And so I did. I started on my school Chromebook, which was a dinky machine. I still am kind of beefing with the technology department there. We'll get there. But by the way, it did start on that piece of technology, and it did start on their internet there. And let's just say that I have a few choice words about some of the things that the technology and more the administrative faculty at that school does. Anyway, we're not talking about that. What you need to know, right, is that this started in high school, and this started right after my religious break. You can hear a lot more about that and why that happened in my Substack. I promise you it's a treasure trove over there. It started with that, and I eventually started writing it. And I kind of just started with, like, the first four Psalms in this were written during high school. The first four were Psalm 1, Liberate my soul, O Lord. Psalm 2, Don't cast your children out to the slaughter. Psalm 3, A faithfully raving Sistina on sainthood. And of course, the fourth one is I am a fool, yet you love me so. And these are the first four in the Wretched Psalter. And as you can probably guess, from that 4 point on, I took a break. And when I say break, I mean probably from the end of senior year, when I started the rambling logs. Those kind of took up my. And then October, I remember something happened, and October, this was right before the big thing happened, but I was at my dad's old apartment, and I remember that there was something, boiling that would eventually become November of that year. Um, but what you need to know is I picked it up again. I was originally just gonna drop it. I originally was like, no, this won't help. And then as I was slowly going to the Orthodox Church and I started slowly learning about the theological tradition, Psalm 5 was the experience of discovering the concept of the Christ, the bridegroom. By the way, he's right there. If you guys can't tell, he was this depiction of Christ was the closest thing that I can describe as like me becoming like that depiction made me into kind of a religious zealot. As I say that as a joke, not like an ortho bro. I left that I left that in Kansas. I'm not an ortho bro. I've never really been an ortho bro. I'm not against ortho bros explicitly. I just think the rhetorical style and some of the critiques that I make are not. Sometimes they're not wrong. Sometimes they're uncharitable, and sometimes they care a little bit too much about the culture of it. But that's its own video. We're not gonna talk about that. But what you need to know is Psalm 5 was my direct when I figured out about bridegroom matins, and I figured out about Christ the bridegroom, and I read the Gospels. And I specifically was going back and reading towards the end of the Gospels, when he calls out the Pharisees, the adulterous woman, the Mary Magdalene scene where he wipes the tears, and then finally I hit the section where Christ is being scourged and all of that kind of stuff, and I remembered the Christ that found me in the bathroom. More on Substack for that information. Because I don't really want to divulge it on YouTube, and quite frankly, a lot of that information I think YouTube may shoot me for. So we'll read that on the Substack. What you know is I picked it up again in October, and I was like, and that was when I discovered him. And not necessarily Christ. I had done that a year ago, but he looked a lot like the Christ that found me, is what I'll say. I hit 5, and I was like, oh, this is fun, right? And then November happened, and I remember November is when I wrote. Let's see here. November is when I really kicked it into gear with writing this. November is where I mark the start of me trying to finish the book. Let's see. Yeah, so it was Butcher's Crossing and the Constructs. It starts at Psalm 6, and I wrote poetry continuously for 4 months. Maybe 4 months. I basically was writing poetry from November to March, leading up into Lent. I finished this right before the start of Lent in April. If I remember correctly, the final file is marked by March 15th. So give or take, that's when it finished. It started, let's say, November 16th when I moved into this apartment, and it ended on March 15th of 2025. And then I decided that I would publish it. And quite frankly, I look back on this and I outdid myself. From all of my debate cases, all of the essays I wrote in school, all of this, it doesn't compare to this. Yes, it is yes, and I will go out and say, maybe this isn't my best work rhetorically. Maybe it will not be my best work. Maybe it isn't my magnum opus. But this came from the heart. This book came from this was like me cleansing myself of all of the religious angst and all of this stuff, before I met Christ, right? This was, and I say before, yeah, this was cleansing me of all this stuff before I met the Christ. And it has 3 acts, and I'll just explain to you the synopsis. It has 3 acts. It has one act, which is ideals and stuff, philosophy, theology, just basically ideals. It's supposed to be, pulling very, very large theological concepts and explaining it to you. Now, it will do it in a poetic format. There will be stories, there will be references to other concepts. There'll be quotes from philosophers. Sometimes it'll even come with a note from the author. Sometimes it doesn't come with anything. I just throw you straight into it. But the first act is called Reasonable and Sacred Ideals. The second act was actually at the behest of my therapist. My therapist told me, why don't you write a second act? Maybe what would help a little bit is if you draw a lot of your poetry back into the real world. So anything that you personally experience or is experientially derived from you, write it down. And and Act 2 is again beautiful. I look back at Act 2 and it's raw, it's unfiltered, it's dark sometimes, and I also bring a lot of wholesome concepts. But anything that I would write in this, it would have to be experientially derived. As Palamas would say, to gain, the highest point of wisdom is to lose it. And so that was like the idea that I was going for, is towards Psalm 70. Everything about that is based in personal experience, whether it's some memories from the past, whether it's something I saw in real life, whether it was maybe it was a conversation that I had with a friend and that gave me an out to write another thing from Act 1. I did that. It's very good. And then I wrote Act 3, and Act 3 is 11 psalms directly worshiping God. If I remember correctly, it starts with a story about creation. Then it goes into a story about Moses on Sinai. Then it goes into a story about Ezekiel, and then after that, it's all Christ. And until you get to the ending psalm, which is Psalm 151, which is called the Consummation of All Things. It's a poem about the Last Judgment. And I look back at that, and I still cry sometimes when I read it out loud. Basically, all of the characters from Act 1, and sometimes, depending on the characters, from Act 2, there were some characters that I made out of Act 2 that were based in things that I saw or read or whatever. So at the end, Psalm 151 is an eschaton scene, and it is the Last Judgment. For what you need to know is basically all of the characters, all of the stories that I depicted, anything that would have like substantive like character development, I had them judged by God, and needless to say, this is a master. Like I'm not gonna call it. I'm not gonna gloat myself too much. That would be prideful, sobriety, all of that, right? I'm very proud of this work, and I'm not saying that to toot my own horn. I'm saying that because I offer this work both to God and to you. If you need some of the concepts in this book, I wrote this for people like you, outcasts, people who don't fit anywhere, people like me. Maybe a political party doesn't care about you. Maybe you're struggling in life. Maybe you feel oppressed. Maybe you feel different. Any number of things. And by the way, this applies. I'm not saying this with a bias. This applies across the board. If you're a conservative, if you're a Groyper Nazi, if you're a Marxist who's got an axe to grind with every single CEO, unless you see a hot one on Tumblr, if you've got an axe to grind with progressives, or maybe you're a progressive, maybe you're a radical Republican, maybe you're an anarchist, maybe that there's that aching part of your soul that needs healing. Every single person is welcome to read my works. I want to make sure that this is an impartial act of love. That's on purpose. There is no bias here. There will not be politics being beaten over your head. That's not what it's supposed to be. It's not even supposed to be like one of those dumb evangelical things to punch you in the face over. We don't do that here. We don't do dumb political books written by an evangelical who decides to spend the first 30 chapters just bashing other religious traditions and not even giving them the time of day for charity or to read. That's not what we do here at Valor 21 KLWH, and honestly, that's not what I do. That was kind of, so I highly recommend this work, and all of that to say, this I will be reading some excerpts from it, or maybe I'll even read the whole series. I don't really care. It depends on the day. But what I will say is stylized readings of the Wretched Psalter will be coming back, because the last time I did one was Christmas, not including Oedipus and the Gorgon. That was its own thing. Oedipus and the Gorgon is in this book, but it also published an excerpt. So yeah, let's get that out of the way. Okay, so the Wretched Psalter. So let's recap a little bit. We got the long form videos coming. We've got the Wretched Psalter series coming. What's next, right? Well, the third thing I'd like to tell you. Oh yeah, all of the Substack, right? The Rambling Logs have become the Substack. You got the Wretched Psalter coming out. You can buy it on Amazon. And what's the third thing happening? Well, a few things. First of all, let me break this to you. I am obviously now an author. I don't know if you guys noticed, but I'm leaving out 2 other books. I read them on this channel. You can find a free audiobook, literally read by me, by the way. Literally read by me to the camera. I'm also very proud of those videos. Now, the Oedipus and the Gorgon one kind of came across a little bit kind of poetic flair. That was on purpose, and I kind of wanted to make it super flair, with a little bit of flair and kind of barbed wholesomeness to it. That was what I was going for with that. But Stadius, I think I got the tone right that I was going for. Stadius, very tender, very loving, but also very insidious, and all of yeah, I got the tone right for Stadius. I'm an author, and as of right now, I have, I think, 6 other works currently loaded into the chamber to publish. No, I haven't got the covers and all of that stuff, but I've finished all of them, the drafts, and they're currently in the editing phase. I will be talking with a friend of mine from church, possibly later, because he helps me publish my books. He's basically my equivalent of Edmund Burke and Wollstonecraft's publishing house person. He's what I like to call my anointed cover guy. So all of the covers were done by, I think he's on YouTube. I don't know if he cares if I plug him. I'm going to plug him anyway, because he's cool and he's a friend of mine. Go follow Cinnamon Tech Tips and Cinnamon. He is a friend of mine from church, and he helped me with these covers. I was going, as you can probably see, this is heavily based off of Penguin Classics. Stadius, Son of Mort is the only one that is stylized a little bit different, and possibly maybe stylized different in the future. But for Oedipus and the Gorgon and the Wretched Psalter, I was going for a very simple, I wanted to not be super dramatic about it. I just wanted to be able to hand it to somebody and be like, all right, take it. Take it for what it is. With the other books are more stylized. I put a lot more care into the storylines and stuff like that. And there's a reason for that. So, new books coming. First of all, the first books that I'd like to talk about are The Carnival of Salt and Wounds and The Psalter of the Salt Flat. The Carnival of Salt and Wounds is a prequel to the Psalter of the Salt Flat, kinda. It's technically only a prequel to the first story. However, they also show up in the ending scene, so I'll mention that. The Carnival of Salt and Wounds is basically, I will just explain it like this. There's also an ad on my Substack you can find. The Carnival of Salt and Wounds is about 4 outcasts who decide to create a theater troupe. And this theater troupe is filled with a lot of, political, from the time period. This is 1830s industrial France. And so a lot of and this is a time of political revolution, and there's a lot of different political parties and, microcosms happening around. And France is also rapidly industrializing. And so when you get all of that mixed together, you basically get a microcosm of the modern West. And I wanted to do that on purpose, and we'll get to that. There is 4 characters. There is Vonnie, who is a Bonapartist, who eventually becomes disillusioned and starts the theater troupe. Now he's kind of he still has a couple of Bonapartist sympathies, but ultimately he's more disillusioned with politics as a whole. However, he does hold a lot of, he's also very dramatic, he's very playful, he's, barbs things, but deep down he's also very insecure. That will come out in the books. The second character is a guy named Marquis. Again, I'm not showing any of these characters, and my apologies. I would, but I don't have, I haven't commissioned some of my stuff. So Marquis is a strongman, and he's like the strongman of the group. You know, like the theater circus. Big beefy guy. He actually was a member of the Sans Culottes during the French Revolution. Read my article on radical republicanism on why that's really funny. Basically, he was a radical Republican, and he joined the revolution specifically to care for the poor. And he was very, 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 very into the revolution until finally, after some stuff happened that's only loosely implied, um, he he becomes extremely disillusioned with the revolution. You know, there were so many bodies rolling in, it eventually became out of control, and he was like, I'm done, I'm done. And when I say I'm done, I mean he became done and not become a saint, but like he became imperfectly, but he was trying. He converted to Catholicism, and he also became a radical pacifist. This obviously, if you marched in the French Revolution, then you decide, hey, yeah, killing people, I've seen a lot of that. You're obviously going to have more pacifistic sympathies. He is a pacifist, but he's also a Catholic. But he also, paradoxically, likes Rousseau a lot, and there's a lot of fun stuff there about that. So keep him in mind. He's former Sans Culotte, maybe 40, maybe 30, 40 years old. This is around 1830, so he'd be around maybe 45. Let's give it that just to be charitable to our man. Let's say 45. Therese. Then there's Therese. She's an orphan. Her parents were diplomats. One of them was super into Voltaire. There's a reason for that, because Voltaire was a satirist and Voltaire was funny. And she didn't get a lot of the anti-religious symbolism, and she didn't even get the anti-religion sentiments from her dad even. But it's implied that her dad was a diplomat, but he was also like an atheist, Enlightenment diplomat. Long story short, she ends up in an orphanage. I won't tell you how. And then she leaves the orphanage and she's homeless, and she's found by Marquis. And there's some cute stuff there. I'll let you guys read the book. She is like, super shy and sweet, and I think you'll like her. The last character is actually one of probably my most controversial one, because it's kind of weird. Okay, I'm not gonna throw you down a rabbit hole. There is documents that you can find on this, but the final character is a woman named Montaigne, and Montaigne is a Cagot. Now, if you guys are not familiar with weird internet historical rabbit holes like I am, and weird ideas about wars and vanishing without a trace, and people being erased from history, don't worry about it. What you need to know is Cagots were a subclass of French people who were horrifically discriminated against, and no one knows why. It's a very, very strange. Some people think it was due to a war. Some people think it was due to some issues left over. Some people issues left over from the Age of Kings, not Age of Kings. Some like the medieval period. Some people go as far as to say that it was back like Gaul and stuff like that. But mostly nobody really knows why people hated them. But all you need to know is that, yeah, they hated them. And you can read about it. It's pretty disgusting. French people would discriminate against other French people. Humans are barbarians. We've gone over this. But she's a Cagot. And she also has ginger hair. That'll come up later. But she basically, she's a Cagot. And she's like a femme fatale, stoic woman character. And she's great. And what ends up happening is she is kicked off of a ferry after, she basically is, goes around odd jobs. She's an orphan, but she's like a lot more of a rough and tumble orphan than Therese was. Therese was like, I'm gonna join an orphanage. Montaigne was like, it's on the streets. So she ended up Vonnie finds her and sort it out yourself. I'll let you read the book because it's really good. These four people end up creating a troupe, and a tragedy happens. And they, all I will say is that it is a tragedy. So go ahead, read it. The Psalter of the Salt Flat is my second large work. It's different than this. It's more structured like a story than an actual. It's more story like a short story collection, kind of prose like a prose story, short story collection, rather than overt poetry. Even this can go into the prose territory sometimes, but this was like overt, like religious prose. It's structured like a story, and there's a reason for that. The Psalter of the Salt Flat takes place in the toll houses. The toll houses are a concept in Orthodox theology. What I will say about this, first of all, because I can already hear the trad bros screaming and a lot of the ecumenists screaming, like, "Quiet down, all of you! Quiet down! We're not about to stone people. That's not what we're doing here." What you need to know is that I am not making a metaphysical claim on if the toll houses exist or not. I am using this as a vehicle to tell a story about Christ's love and mercy. So I want to be very clear about that. I am not writing this to make a claim if it exists or not. I will leave that to the saints and the theologians, all right? I'm a poet, philosopher, and failure who likes theology just a little bit. So that's what I'll say about that. What you need to know is on the concept of theology. On the concept of theology, this is more related to these people being slowly redeemed and sanctified, rather than like a claim about, like salvation or eschatology. It's more about the latter. And basically, it's the Psalter Psalter, and I basically took the ideas of this, ideas of the toll houses and ideas in the Western tradition of purgatory, and I combined them. And basically, it takes place in a giant white salt flat. There is nothing but white, and it's like, it's salt. It's dusty. It's when it's about like, maybe 60 degrees, slightly chilly, but it's just all white. It's perfect room temperature, and it is the souls of the human beings in the salt flat being, slowly redeemed. And the salt flat, basically, for each soul, takes the form of where they lived geographically on Earth. But it's how do I explain this? It's basically the salt. It's basically like, it's like a salt version, basically. There are buildings, but all of them are made out of salt, and salt crystals, salt. And it's basically supposed to be like a dreamlike fugue world. It's like if I took every single thing that existed outside of your window right now and just made it salt. The buildings, the street lamps. If you live out in the country, that's even better, because there's some scenes where it's just a field. That too. That's what you need to know. And slowly but surely, these souls who enter, who are imperfect, or maybe they were heterodox, maybe that there was something like an extenuating circumstance that, kept them from salvation, are given mercy they're given mercy by God to slowly be redeemed and to be received into heaven. It's very cool, and I did that on purpose. And yeah, so those are the two books coming out in July. I think it's July. If I can muster it, it will be the middle of July, possibly July 15th or 16th. If I can't muster it, then it will be the end of July. My goal is to get them out in July. So, what to do after that? Well, I didn't want to saturate the market. I wanted to kind of leave these stories to be judged and to be talked about, either by my friends, by the random passerbys on my channel, maybe people who see it on social media, or whatever stranger finds this out on the internet. I wanted somebody to find it. But I wanted also the market to saturate just a little bit, so that my ideas can kind of proliferate before I just throw stuff at you. Because I don't want to like throw stuff at you, because then it kind of becomes like, whatever, like, I don't want to read this, right? It's like, I want to let them, let it proliferate, maybe, people grow an attachment to it, and then I will release another work. So that brings me to my next point. There are going to be, if I remember correctly, 3 short stories coming out in December of 2025 as a kind of Christmas gift. In December of 2025, there will be 3 works coming out. It will be Mademoiselle Moth. It was a book that I wrote kind of as an apology to a friend of mine after we had a debate. It was very cordial for the most part, and then I said something dumb, and then he got mad that I said, no, okay, it wasn't dumb per se, but I said it wrong, and he had some personal stuff that made him mad at me, and he actually forwarded a really good critique. He did time me out for 2 minutes, and then he let me speak again, because he was like, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that." I was like, "Forgive it, God bless that guy. Like that guy's cool." That may or may not have been my Anointed Cover Guy. Anyway, what you need to know is it was a kind of an apology to my friend. While I do not think, while I do not necessarily, by the way, let's throw this out there. This is a story about I kind of feel funny talking about this. A failed seminarian, an Austrian guy during the 1840s, um, and during the 1840s Italian reunification movement. This is during the fall of the Habsburgs. This is during when Italy's like, we're gonna take you out, right? And Italy is trying to rebel, and the HRE is like not having that. And this failed seminarian from Austria has become extremely disillusioned with the Enlightenment, but not in the way that's like, oh, for country, for monarchy. No, he hates that too. Like has become like angry at at nations and the idea of cultural geist. He's kind of like me, but like if I was kind of mean about it. He's kind of like me if I was like super mean about it, and I was also a lot more extreme in my views. I've talked about my views about nations. I believe they're kind of just geist, but I also think that there is something there to be said about, and I had to learn this. I had to learn that maybe it was more related to a different flavor of human thought or ache or longing. Still not substantive. I mean, still it's substantive, but it's not really worth anything. And I think if we thought about it that way, it would make the world, I think, a little bit better of a place. Well, here's the soup in the pudding. Roland is seeing this illusion with the Enlightenment, and he's been exiled from both places, and he's walking with his, he basically is a merchant, and he sells books, and he sells relics. Now, it's not explicitly said if he stole them, or if he had them, or if he bought them by legitimate means. Just keep in mind that this guy is a Catholic relic and book vendor, and he's walking through, and he's about to die. And it's winter. He doesn't have any place to live, and then he pulls out a lantern and introducing our second favorite character, Nyx. And Nyx, you guys are going to flip just a little bit, but I kind of want you to flip out, is a moth. Like, not like a physical, like a moth person. If you guys are familiar, I don't really like using this analogy because it kind of misses the point, and it's also loaded. But think like the anime, like Monster Girl, like stereotype, but without all of the eroticism. That was what I wanted to do. Was I wanted to take that like clearly fetishized concept and be like, what if like we took out all of the bad baggage, and because I think the thesis of the book really fits this. And quite frankly, I did write a Gorgon too, so like um, basically this moth follows him, and she kind of an idiot. She kind of a dummy, but she dummy in a good way. So like she's dummy, but she's like wholesome and happy, but she's also kind of an idiot. And so Roland is a extremely smart philosopher. Like this guy was going to become a Dominican. He would slice you to ribbons in a debate. And this moth girl is kind of a dummy. And so what ends up happening is she follows him, and then eventually he's like, what the? It's like at this point Roland doesn't care. He's like, all right, fine, I'm gonna walk up to the chapel, and he walks up to this chapel just to get any sense of warmth, and they sit there for a second, and they become really good friends, and they're like, hey, we kind of need to survive the winter. The entirety of the rest of the book, from that point, takes place in an abandoned Austrian estate in the Alps. Because that is a perfect middle ground and would have been the place where these rebels were fighting at the time. And it's like an abandoned Austrian villa in the Alps during the winter. And with that, it is a story about nation and how it relates to the exception to the norm, and how nations can sometimes, if the people are more worried about love and the expression of the good parts of their souls that are influenced by their nation, it can fester a really, really beautiful concept. I will just leave that out. I will just leave that kind of in the air. The second short story I will be publishing is a book called The Fiddler of the Lantern Fog, and it's kind of a black sheep. I wrote it. I remember correctly. I wrote it in 3 days. I can't remember why I necessarily wrote it. It's like tragicomic. It's Mademoiselle Moth is a comedy, right? Overtly. And Fiddler of the Lantern Fog is a tragicomic book, And the third book, which we will talk about in a second, it's one of my favorites, and it's the one that most people, when I showed it to them, said they really enjoyed. It's that one's a tragedy. Fiddler of the Lantern Fog takes place in 1901 Meiji, Japan. This is during the Meiji Restoration period. This is when Japan is becoming more and more nationalist, more and more imperial. But the third one you have to understand is more and more industrial. They're opening themselves up to the West. They're obviously cautious, but they're opening themselves up to the West. The third thing you need to understand is this takes place in a Meiji pleasure district. I will refrain from talking about that because that's its own demon. There's a couple videos you can find online about that, and it's bad. Think like a red light district if a red light district was quite literally sanctioned by the government. And not only was it sanctioned by the government, but it was pretty well put together. This isn't Vegas. This is Vegas with class. Anyway, there's this woman there who works, and she is a prostitute. She's a pleasure district worker. That should give you an idea. She serves tea, and they also pay too. And I'll just leave that out there because I know you guys know what I'm talking about. I don't have to be super euphemistic with y'all, but then as she's standing outside, she meets a random man, and this man is a fiddler, and he likes playing the violin, and he seems to know a little bit more than what he's supposed to about her. And lo and behold, he makes friends with this Russian violinist named Basil. For reference, at this time period in 1901, Japan is currently at war with Russia. I will leave it at that. The third book I wrote is actually one I am extremely proud of, and I cannot wait to publish. Everybody that I've showed it to, even my conservative parents, who I've mentioned in my articles. By the way, my dad, God bless you, you take my rhetorical punching like a saint. Even my mom liked it. I was like, I thought you were gonna hate this book. You can read about her too. Most people that I showed it to were relatively, liked it. Obviously there was my Anointed Cover Guy who was a little bit more hesitant with this book. I kind of want him to read it because it has a good thesis, and it's more charitable. It's more charitable than I think he expects it to be. So Cinnamon, if you're watching this, give it a read. I think you'll like it. I really do. And so what you need to know is the Four Bodies on Lookout Mountain. I will just put it this way. It's called The Four Bodies on Lookout Mountain, relating to the end of the book. I'll just leave it like this. There are four characters. There is a there is a Confederate, let's put it this way. There's a Confederate artist who is an Italian immigrant to the South, who studies under a Confederate, not really Confederate, like an Italian artist named, and his name is Benini. And Benini is is an artist, and he's also Italian, and he's also trying to create a statue of Aphrodite. Before he goes out to get some painting supplies, and there is a war recruiter, and he's able to spin this narrative about the South being the bleeding lamb, and he's able to spin this in very liturgical war recruiter language, something you would see on a military ad or something. They talk about honor and nation and bleed for your country type stuff. If you think this is going to be one of those hit pieces against the South, I can assure you it isn't. It's not going to be a one-sided good versus bad. That's kind of the whole point of the story is that it's not that. We'll get to that. But this guy basically is I'm going to join the Confederacy. This is when we're introduced to the second character, and her name is Gloria. She is a runaway slave from the South. She ran away from a guy named Master Winfrey, and Gloria is a badass. I'll put it that way. I know that I'm excuse my French, but she is a badass, and she has a gun. She's like Montaigne from Carnival of Salt Wounds if she was black and cool, and not even like Montaigne. She doesn't have Montaigne's femme fatale. She's like John Brown if she was black and a woman. She's cool. And this conservative and this Confederate artist who's deeply loyal to the South goes to war for about a few months, maybe a few weeks, few months, and he becomes extremely disillusioned with war. He gets away from his platoon during a skirmish, and he falls, asleep under a tree. He's got dirt in his boots, he's bleeding, his musket, and he wakes up, and here she is, and here Gloria is grabbing water from the stream. In this moment, I will put it this way. In this moment, this shatters his thesis. Not because he is the evils of the Confederacy shattered. No, it's more complicated than that. Because if you remember at the beginning of the story, he was making a statue of Aphrodite, and he just couldn't get it to work. He saw this woman, and he realized that is what I was making. I was making Helena of the Spring. I was making this face that launched 1,000 ships. And then he realized, oh, she's black. But, like, there's no way that somebody can be this beautiful and be this, like, have this, sublime appearance of Aphrodite and be unequal to me. And so that is how his thesis of black people being lesser than him, because he's a Confederate, let's be honest, and it's the 1860s in America. He may be an Italian immigrant, but he also maybe has taken in some prejudice. But in that moment, shatters immediately. And then he wakes up and he's like, oh, this is like the most beautiful thing in the world. And there's a very tense dialogue. But what I will tell you is that they go on a bit of an adventure together. I will leave it at that. The second two characters that we're going to introduce is Marla and Barnabas. Marla is a Southern baker in New Orleans. New Orleans is a particular era of the Civil War that is highly controversial. I can assure you that any debate about this it eventually devolves into a screaming match between either a Marxist, a progressive, or a liberal who thinks that he's too good for the world, and a screaming, angry Confederate guy who's mad about him insulting his people. And I think that's wrong, and I think I'd like to start it from like a perspective of these are human beings, and I'd like to start it at that baseline. Marla is a Southern baker. She's a woman, but she's also one of the few women who has a stable job because she's baking. She's like a Southern belle, if you want to use that weird language. She's a Southern belle, and she's sympathetic to the Confederacy, but she also does, when people are inside of her bakery, she does kind of tone it down a bit, and she'll serve anybody. She'll serve, union people. She'll serve diplomats. She'll serve anybody. And then Marla meets a guy named Barnabas. Barnabas is a union ambassador. He is specifically on a mission. To New Orleans to negotiate peace between. I need to put this in air quotes. Negotiate peace between the North and the South. And that's heavy air quotes because he is there for something else. And I will not spoil what that is, but all you need to know is that this is a tragedy. He does meet this woman, and Barnabas is kind of our sweet little cinnamon roll autist, who's super shy and super bad at social norms. He can have a diplomatic discussion pretty well, but he's not good at social graces, because a negotiation table is not a table of friends. Let's put it that way. And he meets this woman, and long story short, they go on a few adventures together too. Let's put it that way. All four of these characters, I will tell you, end up dead. It's a tragedy. So I just want to let you know that's what you're getting in for. But I promise you, it's a really good book. Okay, those are the 3 books coming out in December. The last set of books that I'm still kind of developing are my first ever philosophy treatise. Remember the one that I mentioned at the beginning, the one that I had to gut several times? This philosophy treatise is the expanded upon version of that. I had to gut the original one, and if you guys, and by the way, counseling department, if you guys remember this was the On Tyranny thing. I think if you guys still check your computers, if you guys are still working there, you'll notice a bunch of differences. That's all I'll say. But basically, it is my first ever philosophy treatise, and it is a theological and philosophical reflection on human ontology and axiology. It's basically talking about. It's basically trying to nail down It's basically trying to nail down the difference between human beings, right, and human value. And it's also trying to nail down the idea of how these play out in social hierarchy. I will leave it at that. And I will leave it for anybody who's a nerd and reads, treatises for fun like I do. But the last thing I will mention is the last book, and it's a bit of a surprise. Before I explain to you the last book, I need to tell you about the other two books that I have published. These two books. These two are the other two books, and you're noticing that they're noticeably shorter. They are noticeably shorter because these are my short stories. This is Oedipus and the Gorgon, and this is Stadius and Solomon the Mort. This one you can get on Amazon, but right now we won't be talking about it. Just throw it to the side. Right now we are talking about this one. This is embedded in this, but it's embedded in like scattered remnants. This is an excerpt of the actual story itself, reorganized into its proper order. This is Oedipus and the Gorgon. And remember I mentioned the joke about monster girls towards the middle of this video. Well, this was the first thing where I started playing with that. It is a story. I will just leave it at this. It is I will leave it at this. Oedipus, a blind vagabond and a lover of wisdom, has walked the roads of kings and beggars alike. He has sat at the tables of philosophers and thieves. Oedipus. Oh, I probably already ruined this, but let's start from the beginning, shall we? There are many stories of love, some tragic, some sublime, some foolish, but Oedipus and the Gorgon is a love story of a different kind. It is not a fleeting passion of youthful romance, nor the poetic idealism of a bard's verse. This is a story of love as rebellion, love as sacrifice. Love as vision beyond the veil of vanity. Oedipus is a blind vagabond and a lover of wisdom, who has walked the roads of kings and beggars alike. He has sat at the tables of philosophers and thieves, converts with prophets and drunks, and has seen the world in a way and that which those with sight could never fathom. He is a cynic, a fool for truth, and a seeker of the real. His eyes were not taken from him, he gave them up, tearing them from his face in an act of rebellion against the world's illusions. The Gorgon is a creature of legend, beautiful and terrifying, cursed and alone. She is a monster in the eyes of men, feared for her gaze, which turns to stone all who look upon her. But beneath the curse is something deeper, a soul longing for communion, for touch, for love untainted by fear. For all of her power she is vulnerable, trapped in the darkness of her cave, knowing only betrayal and solitude. This is a story about the meeting of two outcasts, two exiles from the world of men. One has lost his eyes to see beyond illusion, and the other has been made into a monster for daring to exist. Together they will walk the path of lovers, saints, and fools toward a love that does not consume but empties, a love that does not enslave but liberates. That is Oedipus and the Gorgon. So, sorry about the bad rhetorical thing where I tried to read a second paragraph. I read all of it for y'all because I was like, this don't make sense if I don't explain it. Anyway, so I'm publishing a thing that is only loosely alluded to in this book. What I will tell you is that in the last psalm, I loosely mention a trial that Oedipus has to go through. And what I mean by trial is not, difficulty, it's court trial. Like, this dude get dragged in front of the king. And so and it is a clear reference to Plato's Apology, and if that interests you, give this a read first, and then go and read that when I publish it in 2026. All right. So, those are the final updates. A few, basics, just to go over everything we've talked about. Number one, the Rambling Logs will be changing into the Substack articles. Number two, the very important one is that the Wretched Psalter series is coming back on my channel. And number three is I've just given you the book, the book list that is coming out. And the final thing I'd like to say is that there will be more things coming out in the future. I am basically an artist on a pension. I have a part-time job, but I do try to commission artists if I have a little bit of extra money. I do this because I know that AI art sucks. We'll talk about AI art later, but what you need to know is I don't use AI in anything that I publish for real. I will only use it on social media posts, and I will say that I use it on social media posts, and I only use it on Substack articles. Everything substantive that I do, I will always use real art, even if it's public domain, even if I have to commission it. So, I'm also, there will be maybe a few things coming out in the future. Maybe more philosophy treatises, maybe more short stories. And also, I am currently learning how to write music. I'm currently doing a serenade for strings. That's all I'll tell you. Is that yes, there will be some music coming out in the future as well. With that, I think that ends my channel update, and we're getting towards an hour. Yeah, that's crazy. An hour of this. Wow. Thank you guys so much for watching, by the way, and God bless you. I will be linking the Substack. I will be linking, my Amazon pages for my books. And the last thing I will mention is all of my works, on purpose, are in the public domain. So if you cannot afford these things, if you cannot afford these things, if you can't, if you don't have money, I make very, very clear that I will always offer free PDFs. I will not give you physical copies, but I will absolutely give you a digital copy for you to read personally, and even share around. If you want to pirate my books, that works too. Don't really care. If you got a secret printing press in the back or a digital copier, do you, buddy, as long as you're not selling it. Not because I don't really care if you sell it, right? I just want, it's not even like I'm going to sue you. It's like that kind of breaks the whole point. So don't sell it, but like, feel free to pirate everything that I write. I'm pretty open about my characters. Also, feel free to expound upon any of the ideas that you see in here. Even if it's meant to critique me, that works too. I am very open about my characters. Feel free to take some of my concepts, my characters, and just make fan art of them. Make stuff that you wish you saw, right? Like, I know that you artists on Twitter enjoy doing that. Maybe you see an interaction, you're like, I need to see that alive. Maybe you think of my characters, you're like, oh, that would be really cute. I really don't care. The only part where I'm like kind of uncomfortable is don't make like overtly like NSFW stuff or like sinful things, then we kind of have a problem. But I'm not gonna like stop you. I'm just gonna be like, don't do it. Does that make sense? So just from one human being to another, just be careful with that. Is all I will say. With that, that ends my channel update. We are in the hour mark here, and it fits right in with the new stuff, I think. So with that, thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to check out my Substack. I will be uploading maybe some Wretched Psalter stuff. I will also and also feel free to check out my Twitter or X or whatever, Valor21me, and my Instagram. All that stuff will be provided. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been Caleb WH, or Caleb or Lawrence or whatever you want to call me. It's very good to see y'all, and God bless you, and may Christ keep you.